start. Okay, today's daf is daf samach dalid, and we're beginning from daf where we left off yesterday on daf samach gimel amid beis, and the Gemara is discussing over here some psukim that are written by the rebuke, the toichacha in the Torah, and what happens if we don't observe the commandments, all the curses that can happen to us. And this got into the Gemara because the Gemara was discussing about bad women, and that's how the Gemara got into this discussion. But anyway, the pasuk says in the Varim, and then we'll get back to the topic at hand of marriage. The Gemara says, the pasuk says in the Teichecha, Bonecha, Bonesecha, if you don't keep the Torah, your boys and girls, Nesunim la'am acher, will be given over to another nation. What does that mean? Amrav Chanan Barav, Amarav, Zu Eishes A. The Loyalenu will experience in the Jewish world a lot of people losing their mothers, Loyalenu, and then they'll have to grow up by a stepmother. And that's not always good. If it's not always works out well. So that's what it says. Your children and your daughters, your young daughters, are going to be given over to another mother because your first wife is going to die, and your second wife will be the stepmother. And then the Gemara says, "Begoy." The pasuk says, "Begoy novel," with a repulsive nation. Achisem, I'm going to cause you anguish. So that's also part of the Teichacha. Amar Rav Chanan Barava Amar Rav, that many people will experience the following: Zu isha ra'a uksubasa meruba. They'll have a bad woman, but the ksuba will be so expensive that it'll be too difficult for them to divorce. So that's also part of the Teichecha. And that's how this Gemara got in. Reb Lezer explains, Elu haminim. These refer to, the Christians that were part of the Jewish people, and they turned out to be our worst enemies. The Chain hu oimer, and the pasuk says, Alma nava beliboy ein elihim. The novel is somebody who says that there is no God. In other words, God doesn't concern himself about particularly what's going on in the world, which is the anti of what the Jews believe, that God is very precise and is observant of what goes on in this world. So that's how they learned of the Begoy novel Achise. But Masnita Tana, the Brisa, learns that this refers to Elu Anshe Barbaria Anshe Mortune. These are the funny people, different types of people that are like Africans. Shemahalchim Arubim Beshuk. They walk around in the street without clothing, practically without clothing, and they're going to be people that will cause us anguish. The BLM people. There's nobody more disgusting before the Eibishter. It's good to remember because the summer is coming. That nobody is more disgusted by God. It's somebody who walks in the street, burying himself, basically. So that's how Chadash Baruch Hu is going to make these homeless or these types of people cause a lot of anguish to the Jewish people. Rabbi Yochanan says it refers to AlKhabarim. These are the Chabarim. What are Chabarim? These are types of wild people, Persians, that didn't believe in God, and they were anti-Jewish, anti-Semites. They told Rabbi Yochanan, Asu Chabore leBavel. The Chabore now migrated to Bavel. Shaga Nafal. He turned and bent over and fell because he knew that these type of people cause a lot of trouble. They moved into the neighborhood of Bavel, the Jewish neighborhood. Amrulei, but they told him Mekabli Shuchada that you could bribe them, you could give them a little money, and they let they don't bother you as much. Taritz Yasser. So he sat up and he felt a little better. Like they say by the Haggadah, what you say, V'hisha Amda. They all come to destroy us, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu saves us by allowing us to put some shoichet, some bribery into their hands. That's one of the cute pshatim. Anyway, that's what they said. Anyway, these Chabore came to Babel, but nevertheless, they took over the government and they gozru al gimel mipnei gimel. They made 3 edicts against the Jewish people because of three averos the Jewish people were doing. First, they said, Gazru ala basar, they forbid people to slaughter, mitnei hamatonos, because the reason is the Jewish people were not giving the gifts to the Kohen. So therefore, they took power and outlawed shchita. They closed the bathhouses. Presumably, they came up with some reason that it's not healthy to have public bathhouses. But the real reason is because the Jewish people were not being makbid, and people in Bavel were not being makbid so much to go to the mikvah. And not only that, they started to dig up graves and pulling out the bodies that were buried. And why did they do that? The Jewish people were joyful on their holidays. If you're joyful on their holidays, God will punish you and your fathers. And wait a second, your fathers are long gone. How could Hashem punish you and your fathers at the same time? That's by digging them up. The digging up of the graves, because the averis that the live kids are doing, it causes that the dead are being dug up. Amalei Rava Rabbi Mamari. Rava said to Rabbi Mamari, Ksiv, there's a pasuk that says in Yirmiyah that discusses the bad the bad things that are going to happen to the Jewish people. He says, Yirmiyah says, Lo ya'asvu, they'll not be gathered. V'lo yikavru, they will not be buried. L'doimen apnei adama yiu, they'll be like dead corpses lying all over the ground. Those are the pictures that you have right when they liberated the camps. Uksiv, and the pasuk says, V'nifcha mavis mechayim, people would rather choose dying than living. Wait, what does that mean? If these are the way the corpses are, who would want to choose that kind of death when the corpse is going to be ending up lying all around? Amalei, so Rabbi Mamari explained that Nivcha Mavis the Rishoyim, death will be chosen for the Rishoyim, so that they shouldn't continue to sin in this world and then be punished in the next world. So even the death like that is better for these Rishoyim who don't keep any of the Torah and no tshuva and anything like that. They do less, they cut their life short so that they won't over sin and fall into Gehenna. New Gemara. Kasuv b'Sefer Ben Sira. There's written in the Sefer Ben Sira, says the Gemara. Sefer Ben Sira was a Jewish ethical book written by the son of Yirmiyahu. It's a religious book, but it's a Jewish book with good, solid moral ideas. And so it's often quoted for their advice and their wisdom in the Gemara. So in the Sefer Ben Sira, it says the following wisdom. Isha toiva matana toiva l'bala. A good wife a good woman is a great gift for a husband. Well, right? We see it in our time that Reb Chaim Kanievsky was zocheh to have such a great wife. And that's how he was able to become who he became. Uksiv, the pasuk says, "Toiva b'cheik yirei Elokim tinasim." It's best such a wife should be given in the lap of somebody who is a tremendous Yirei Shamayim. They'll benefit most from a good wife. Isha ra, but a bad wife, tzaras labala, is something that gives affliction to the husband. It causes the husband to become sick. Maita kante, what's the remedy for somebody who has a bad wife? Yugashenu, you should get rid of her. Bisrapa mitzrata, and then you'll heal yourself from your sickness. And basically, on those conditions, certain conditions require a person to divorce his wife. Isha yafa, if you have a beautiful woman that has good midos and is pretty and does good things, ashril bala, lucky the husband. Mispar yom of kiflayim, that's another piece of wisdom, that all his days, no matter how long he lives, it's almost as if he lived double, because every day is a blessing to have such a wife. Another piece of wisdom is halim einecha me'eshes chein pen tilacha b'mtsudasa. Ignore or push your eyes away from a attractive woman that's not your wife. Pen tilacha b'mtsudasa. Maybe you'll be caught in her web. Al tate eitzabala limsech ima yain sheikha. Don't go and go out and double date with her husband and have wine and drinking. Ki b'toyar isha, it always leads to problem. Ki b'toyar isha yafa, because of the shape of a beautiful woman, rabim hushchasu, many people, great people were destroyed. Ba'atsumim kol haragel. Those that were killed by her are considered powerful people. So again, intermingling with other people's wives, especially if she's someone somewhat outgoing, it's a very dangerous situation. Another piece of advice is Rabim Hoya Pitzei Reichel. He's talking about right now a piece of advice of don't go into a profession that causes you to be around women. Rabim Hoya Pitzei Reichel. There was many great people. There are many great runes to a peddler. Harmagilin Ledvar Avera, that are accustomed to be around potential erva. Kinitzitz licentious behavior. Kinitzitz hamaver gachelis, like a spark that lights a coal. Kechluv mole oif, like a nest that's full of birds. Kein b'tehem mole mirma, so is their houses full of deceit. I think what he's trying to say over here, this piece of wisdom, is that there's certain things that if you feel that it's a profession that involves you meeting with a lot of women, in the end, a lot of it seems insignificant in the beginning, but if you do it often, it can light it could be a spark that lights a whole fire, and that's what you see today. Some psychologists who see women privately, and then the scandal breaks. Now. And the final piece of advice, another 3 pieces of advice. Don't stress yourself out tomorrow, what's going to happen tomorrow, because you don't even know what's going to happen today. Shema mocha ba, maybe tomorrow will come, beinenu, and you're not around. Maybe you'll die and you're going to be stressed out of a world that's not yours. Be more present in your thoughts. Then he says, don't let everybody walk into your house. Hold back. Don't bring every wayward person into your house, even though you want to do chesed, but not everybody should belong into your house. You should be friends with many people, but only reveal your private secrets only to 1 in 1,000. Back to the marriage. Rabasi said, Ein ben David ba yichlu kol hanashamis shebeguf. God, so to speak, has a closet called Guf, and in it is all the neshamas. Until he empties that closet full of these neshamas and brings these souls down to earth, God will not bring the Messiah. Shenema ki ruach milfonai yatayf, or the ki ruach milfonai, because I have these spirits in front of me. Yatayf, I'm holding back from. Yatayf means I'm holding back from bringing the Mashiach, because of these souls that I created. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa. Rabbi Lezer says, if anybody, whoever does not want to bother himself with having children, and that's very, I work in a very artistic neighborhood, put it that way, and nobody's interested to get married there. So the Gemara says, whoever is that type of a person, and Oisik B'Piriyu Rivers doesn't include just to marry and have a child, in raising the children. Ki'ilu Shayfich Damin. The Torah compares it as if you're committing murder. Shenema, the Pasuk says in Parashas Noach, Shayfich Dama Adam Damai Yishafek. Whoever murders somebody, he's going to be murdered. Uksiv Basrei V'atem Priruvu. And then God commands Noach, you should be fruitful and multiply. That juxtaposition considers that if you don't get married, it's as if you're killing a person. Rabbi Yaakov says, here it's the Rabbi Yaakov who said it, Ki'ilu mamayit hadmus, as if you're minimizing the form of God in this world. Shenema, the pasuk says, K'bitzelem elikim asa es hadam. God made man in his form, and therefore you're causing less God in this world. Uksib basrei, and afterwards it says V'atem pruruvu. So therefore, it's important to get married. Ben Azai says a combination of both. If someone doesn't get involved in getting married, is ki'ilu shoyfech daman, as if you're killing people, umamayet hadmus, and you're minimizing God's presence in this world through the forms of humans. Shnema atem pruruvu. So Ben Azai took the statement of both of them and combined it in his own statement. So you think that Ben Azai was promoting getting married. Amru Lloyd Ben Azai, so they told Ben Azai, Yesh no doirish v'no makayim. Some people expound very well. They're good speakers, v'no makayim, and they keep what they expound on. No makayim. Some people just have beautiful actions, and they keep ve'ei no doirish, but they're not good speakers. But you, no darish, you're a good speaker, but ain't no makayim, but you don't keep your word. You're talking about promoting getting married and how terrible it is to remain single, and you yourself never got married. That's hence he's called Ben Azai. We don't even mention his first name. His first name was actually Shimon, but we call him the son of Azai. Amr lehen, so he's Amr lehen Ben Azai. So Ben Azai said, "Me aseh, what can I do?" Shenafshi choshka b'Torah. He gives an odd answer that my soul is so fantasized with the Torah. And therefore, and therefore, the world can continue to exist with other people getting married. I can't. I don't think he was trying to say that just because I'm learning Torah, I'm exempt from getting married. What he's trying to say is because his mind was so wrapped in Torah, he couldn't be with a normal wife. He couldn't have normal relations with a wife. It was almost impossible for him. That's the way his mind worked. And therefore, he said such a thing. But he remained single. Tanya Idach, we learned in another brisa. Reb Lezer Oimer, Kol mi she'ein oisik b'piri v'rivya. Anybody who doesn't get involved with piri v'rivya, he'll shefer damim, that's the same Reb Lezer as before. But here, the brisa has another version. Instead of saying Reb Yaakov, it says Reb Lezer ben Azariah, Mekil Mamayat Hadumus, ben Azariah, Amrulay ben Azariah, Yeshna v'daris. So it's just another brisa that just changes the name. Tanu Rabbanim, the rabbis taught. The pasuk says, "Uvenucha yoymar." Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Mishkan, "When you take a rest, Shuva Hashem, return Hashem, and put your presence, Rivalry Alpha Yisrael, amongst the 22,000 Jewish people." In other words, when they were traveling in the desert, and when they came to a stop, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Let's stop, and God should return His presence to rest amongst us by the Mishkan, amongst the 22,000 people." Malamed, we go to Samach Dal and Aleph. Malamed, this teaches you she'ein hashchina shura al pochas mishnei alafim mishnei revaves misrael. The Shechina, God's presence, does not rest in less than 22,000 people. I'm not sure what the number of 22,000. Maybe there was 22,000 Levium. There happened to have been 600,000 Jews in the desert. But Moshe singled out that even if there was only 22,000 Jews, that's a special number that God's presence should rest amongst the Jewish people. So the Gemara is now discussing how important it is to have a child. If there were 22,000 people, less one person. And this, why is there one person less? Because one guy decided to get married. So that person caused the whole problem. That person, that the whole God's presence should be removed from the Jewish people because we're one short of what God needs. We need that one person to complete the number 22,000 because he didn't get married or found a reason not to get married. He caused that the Shekhinah doesn't rest amongst Klal Yisrael. Abba Chanan Mishum Rebbe Lezer Oima. Abba Chanan says in the name of Rabbi Eliezer that whoever doesn't get married, Chayiv Misa, really is liable for death. Shenema, the pasuk says about Nadav and Abihu that Ubanim loy hoyo lehem. The Torah stresses that they didn't have children. Ha hoyo lehem banu. If they did have children, loy mesu, they would have died. So one of the reasons, amongst other reasons, that they died was because they didn't get married. Perhaps if they did get married, even though they did something wrong, Hashem would have punished their children, but not them. And because they didn't have children, God took out a punishment of death against them. Others say that if you don't have children, you're causing the Shekhinah to remove itself from the Jewish people. Shnema, the pasuk says, that God will be for you a Lord and to your children after you. So we darshan bizman shezarecha acharecha, because when Jewish people have children, Shekhinah shaira, the presence of God rests. Ein zaracha acharecha, if there is no children after you, al mi shaira, on where's God going to put His presence? Ala eitzim alabonim, on wood and stones. I mean, if you give up having children because you want to build nicer places of places to live and other nonsense, and then what do you expect? God should rest his presence over there. God rests his presence when there's Jewish people, when there's Jewish children. Anyway, new Mishnah. New Mishnah discusses like this. What happens, Nasa Isha? The Mishnah says, if you married a woman, Vishaha Ima Esashanim, and you stayed with her 10 years, and Lo Yaleinu V'lo Yolda, she didn't have not one child. Because if she had one child, even though you didn't have the two children, that's okay. But here, she didn't have children at all. Eine Rashay Levatel. He can't, give up, in other words. He can't give up. He either, Rashi explains, either he'll divorce her or he has to marry a co-wife. In fact, we're going to learn that the shita of the Gemara is that you actually force the guy to get married, to divorce her, even though he likes this woman. But in those times that you could force, the Bezdin had a right to force somebody to get married to somebody he's capable of having children. Now, there's nothing wrong with her per se, that just because she didn't have children with this guy, could be that this union is not a good union. But Gersha, when he divorces her, mutaris li nasi lacha, she can marry somebody else who did not have children as of yet, because she's not considered as somebody who's incapable of having children. And the second husband can be with her 10 years and test her out to see if she could have children. But she could only marry twice. If after the second husband sees that she can't have children after 10 years, he also has to divorce her. Now they go back to the Mishnah and we say, the imhi pila. Let's say you're married to the woman and the woman had a stillbirth, okay, or she miscarried. Then moinim mishas shapila. Then we count the 10 years from the time that she miscarried. But again, if she continues to miscarry, that then after 2 or 3 times already, then we don't count anymore how many miscarriages. You might have to divorce her after 10 years. So the Gemara continues. Tanu Rabbanan, the Rabbi is expounded in the Brisa on this statement. Nasa isha v'shai ima she'es hashanim v'lo yolda yoytze v'yitin ksuba. If you're married to a woman and for 10 years didn't have children, you have to divorce her and give a ksuba. Why? Maybe you didn't merit to have children from her, and it's just that union is not going to have children. Even though I can't prove it, there's some hint to it in the Torah, because the Torah says, at the end of 10 years of Avram living in the land of Canaan, and Sarah did not have any children, he took another wife called Hagar. To teach you, and I'm going to say the way the Rishonim explain it. For Avram Avinu, living outside Israel does not count, because obviously Avram Avinu was married many, many years to Sarah, and he didn't take a co-wife. But it's only after he lived 10 years in Israel and he still didn't have children, then he took a co-wife. And the reason is because Avram was promised to have children only after he comes to Israel. So because of that, the living outside of Israel doesn't count for the 10 years. So only when Avraham Avinu returned to Israel and stayed there 10 years and still didn't have children, only then he took another co-wife of Hagar. So the Gemara expands that, and he says like this: Leficha, therefore, chala hu oishachol sehi. Let's say he gets sick or she got sick. They're still doing it. They're still cohabitating, but there's a reason why this marital relation is not working. Or shneim chavushim bebeis asurim. Both of them are incarcerated in the same jail, and could be in jail. They're doing it. They're living with each other, but that's not counted because they're not doing it in their own home with perfect health. It doesn't count. Just like you don't count the years that Avraham Avinu lived outside of Chutz La'aretz, so also you don't count if there's a reason to give as to why this couple did not have children. Then that doesn't count for the 10 years. It has to be a perfect setting of them living at home for 10 years and everything is fine and everybody's healthy, and he counted 10 years, then he's required to divorce her and marry somebody else. Amalei Rava, interestingly enough, in the book, it's Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky advised couples who didn't have children to move to Israel. And there are stories that when couples who did not have children in Chutz La'aretz moved to Israel, they had children. Amalei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava said to Rav Nachman, let us learn from Yitzchak. Yitzchak was 40 when he got married, and he was 60 when he had his first child. So we see from there that you could wait 20 years. Amalei, and then he prayed. Then he started to pray for a child. Amalei, so Rav Nachman answered to Rava, Yitzchak akar haya. Yitzchak was sterile. He could not have children. So the truth is, Yitzchak could have waited many, many years. He would never take a co-wife or divorce Rivka because he knew that he was very sick, sterile. He could not have children. So the Gemara says, Ihachi Avram Nami akar haya. We know from another place that Avram Avinu was also sterile. So what's the proof from the pasuk that he took a co-wife? Could be he didn't have to take a co-wife after 10 years. He just took one, but the Gemara says that the reason why he did not divorce her because he was a very sick person. Maybe if you know that you're not sick and you know you're not sterile, and maybe the halacha would be that you could wait 2 years and divorce your wife. So how did we know? Where do we see that 10 years is that significant? Answer the Gemara. The reason why you learn from Yitzchak, that the fact that we know Yitzchak was 60 years old when he had Yaakov was only to give the number of years of how Yaakov's life panned out, and that there's a certain 14 years that he learned in yeshiva, but prior to him going to the house of Lavan. So that's not an extra pasuk. But true to the form, the pasuk that says "Miketz es hashanim" that Avram was in the land of Canaan is really a superfluous pasuk, and that teaches you the halacha elsewhere, even though it did not apply to Avram Avinu because Avram Avinu was a sterile person, but it applies to anybody who's married to his wife and he knows he's not sterile. That after 10 years you have to find another wife. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, Yitzchak Abinu Akarhai. Yitzchak was sterile. Shnema b'yeta Yitzchak Lashem lenoichach ishtoi. Yitzchak prayed to his wife, he prayed to God corresponding to his wife. Al ishtoi loinema. He didn't pray about his wife loinema. Elenoichach. He was opposite his wife. In other words, he was praying for his wife the same thing he prayed for himself. What does that mean? This teaches you that they were both sterile. Yitzchak prayed that his wife was sterile, and he was praying for himself because he also knew that his sperm count was non-existent, and therefore he did a special prayer. So then, if both of them were praying, so why does the pasuk say "Ihachi v'yeter that God acquiesced to him and made him unsterile? V'yeter lehem. It should say God acquiesced to both of them and made them both unsterile. Why does it say that Yitzchak got healed? So not really. The pasuk is saying, wants to give you another idea. You cannot compare Tfilat Tzaddik ben Tzaddik, Tfilat Tzaddik ben Rasha, to the prayer of a Tzaddik, the son of a Tzaddik, which is Yitzchak, the son of Avram, to the prayer of Rivka, the son of Besuel. So, but that point is that like this. Well, of course, God heard both of their prayers and healed Rivka and healed Yitzchak, but the Torah stresses that God listened to Yitzchak and healed him to bring out another point that God took special attention to Yitzchak because he had the schus avos, he had the merits of his father, and therefore his prayer was more potent. So Rabbi Yitzchak, interestingly enough, so we just learned that Yitzchak Avinu was impotent. So Amma Rabbi Yitzchak said, it's interesting that the Amira that speaks about this his name is Yitzchak. Why was our forefathers impotent? Why? God desires the prayers of the tzaddikim, which means that God wanted our forefathers to pray for the impossible. And that is a simon for us that in all situations we have the potential within us to pray for the impossible. Epigenetics, we can change our genes to get something that we need to happen in our lives, and nothing is the prayer is unlimited. And that's the lesson that we see from the others. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Lama nimshlu tefillah shel tzadikim ke'eser. Why is the prayers of our tzaddikim compared to a pitchfork? Ma eser zem hapech atvu makam u'makam. It can turn tvua from place to place, produce from place to place. Kach tefilas shel tzaddikim mehapechas midosef shel kadosh baruch hu midas rak zonos to midas rak monos. God, the power of our prayers of tzaddikim can turn around God's measures, God's strictness to a measure of sympathy. Amar Rabami says, how bad was it? Avram and Sarah tumtim hayo. Avram and Sarah were tumtimim. They were people who their genitals were covered with a foreskin. Shnema, the pasuk says, Habiti el tzur chitzaptem. Look, we go to Amar Beis. Well, makaves barnu kartem, the pit that we were dug out from. In other words, look towards Avram, your father, and Sarah, the one who gave birth to you. In other words, God had to sort of carve out their genitals from Sarah and from Avram Avinu so that they can have the proper organs to be able to procreate. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Babavua. Sari Imenu Island Saisa. Sari Imenu was a type of woman that was missing something in her physique to be able to have children. Lo Yaleinu. Shnema, the pasuk says, Vati Sarah Akara. Sarah was sterile. Ein lav volad. She did not have a child. What does it mean? Ein lav volad. Afila bais vlad ein la. She didn't have a place, a home to hold a baby inside of her. That's how bad it was. And yet they were able to create the impossibility. And that's a big lesson for anybody, any Jew who comes from Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Abrav Yehuda Brei Rav Shmuel Bashilas Shei the Rab. Lo Yishanu Ela B'Darish Shayim. We learned in our Mishnah that you spoke after 10 years, then you can change out your wife. Or right, if you didn't give birth. That was in the earlier generations where Shenasayim Merubais, they lived long lives. Ava B'Darish Achrayim, in the later generations, Shenasayim Mu'atais, people don't live that long. After Shtei Shana Mechsa, 2.5 years, Keneged Shloisha Iburim, that's the corresponds to 3 pregnancies. 3 pregnancies is 9 months each, is 27, plus give a month in between each pregnancy makes it 27 plus 3 is 30. If after 30 months you didn't have a child with this woman, you can divorce her nowadays. Rabba Amar Rav Nachman, Rabba said in the name of Rav Nachman, you wait 3 years, Shalashon, Keneged, Shalosh Pekidas, so that you pass 3 Rosh Hashanahs, because on Rosh Hashanah you can pray for the impossible. So we give 3 chances for the woman and this couple to pray for the impossible. On Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Chana were able to work out that they were capable of having children. So we see that they disagreed. Our Mishnah was written for our Mishnah's time of 10 years, but nowadays the Zman is much shorter. But comes along Amarabba, Lisnei Lahani Klali. We don't, whatever they said, we don't hold like. In other words, the Mishnah is firm on the 10 years, because when was the Mishnah written? Michte Masnisiban Takim. Who wrote the Mishnah? Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He put it together. So and Rebbe lived at a time where the lifespan was short. From the time of David and Melech, the lifespan became shorter. Even David and Melech lived only 70 years. So therefore, and nevertheless, despite that our lifespan is shorter, Rebbe wrote that the Zman is 10 years, not 3 years, not 30 months. So that remains firm as the halacha that it's the 10-year mark. Now, the Gemara says, the Mishnah says that maybe this union was not merited, that he wasn't going to merit to have a child from her. Maybe the Mishnah says, maybe you didn't merit to have a child with her. How do you know it's his fault? Maybe it's she is at fault. Maybe it's she that's at fault. How do you know it's for sure him is the problem? In fact, when he divorces her, he has to give her a ksuba. So the Gemara says, Ihi, her, since she wasn't commanded with the mitzvah of Puruvu, so she wouldn't get punished in that way of not being able to have children. So therefore, it must be his problem, and that's why he has to divorce her and give the ksuba. So the Gemara asks the question, it's never his problem. So the Gemara, it's never her problem. Ini, it's not true. Do you have to wait 10 years? In other words, does our Mishnah hold water? That's the Gemara's question. That you have to divorce and marry somebody else. But that's not true, because there's a story that the Rabbanan told Rab Ava bar Zavda. He was married probably many, many years and didn't have children with his wife, and he stayed married to her. They told him to save itis of Oila B'nai, marry another woman and have children. You can't stay like this with your current wife because you're not having any children. He said to them, Izakai, if I'm lucky, if I have the schusim, have a limekamaisa, I will have from her. Even though it was more than 10 years, I will have from my first wife. I don't need to take anybody else. So we see that you don't even have to, even after 10 years, you can still continue to living with your wife. Answers the Gemara are fascinating teretz. The reason why Rab Abba bar Zavda did not want to marry somebody else, he was pushing away the Rabbanim and giving them a backhanded answer. The real reason why he didn't want to marry somebody else, because something happened to him. The Rab Abba bar Zavda, he became impotent because he went to Rav Huna's shir. As we learned, he was in this Rav Huna's class. Rav Huna spoke for a very, very long period of time. He probably had the front row. And he held back from urinating. And when you hold back from urinating, it causes a person to become impotent. And he was impotent. He knew he couldn't have any children anymore. And the Gemara says, no, he wasn't the only one that had this problem going to this class. Rav Gidel Yaakam and Pikar de Rav Huna. Rav Gidel also became impotent because he went to the class of Rav Huna. Rav Chelbe Yaakam and Pikar de Rav Huna. Rav Chelbe also became impotent because of the lectures of Rav Huna. They were too long. And we saw yesterday, 2 days ago, Rav Sheshes Yaakam and Pikar de Rav Huna. Rav Sheshes also became impotent from the lectures of Rav Huna. But not everybody. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Achadei Suschis. He also had this problem where he got some sicknesses that made him somewhat impotent. But Taluye Ba'arza de Beirav, he hung himself or suspended himself on a cedar pole that was in the base medrash in a certain direction. Unufak b'mei kuhutza kiyarkin, and a green substance that was as green as a palm leaf came out of his organ, and then he became capable of having children. Omar Rav Ach, and this is, I don't know what the lesson to learn is, but you see the cover that they had for their rabbis, no matter how long he was going to speak. And the Gemara says, Omar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Shitin Saveh Habib. There were 60 elder people who came to the shir, the lectures of Rav Huna, and he went on and on and on, and they didn't want to leave in the middle. The Kuli Iakam Epirked Rav Huna, and they all became impotent from the lectures of Rav Huna. Lebar, except Ma'ana, the Kaima Banafshe, Bar Ma'ana, except for me, Rav Acha bar Yaakov, I attended the lectures of Rav Huna, and I did not become impotent. The Kaima Banafshe, HaChochma Techayeha Ba'aleha, that the wisdom keeps the owners alive. I mean, if you have a little smarts, you sit in the back of the class so you can exit the class when you need to go to the bathroom. I saw somewhere that Rab Chaim Kanievsky wrote that at one time, we'll stop over here, but at one time he was asked to, he thought he would be a Rebbe in a yeshiva, and he took a substitute job in a Rebbe in a yeshiva, and he said he wasn't such a good teacher because one by one the students started leaving to the bathroom, and he always was a nice person. He gave everybody permission until everybody left the class except him and one other student. And he asked the student, maybe you want to go too? Because when you go, I'm going to also go. So he claimed that he wasn't such a good teacher in the classroom, and everybody left to the bathroom when he was teaching. Anyway, we're leaving off over here by the middle of the daf over here, but we'll continue by Gershom Mutaris tomorrow and catch up a little bit.